13. I'm going to guarantee you have never in your life heard a sermon on Acts 13. And I'm going to guarantee you probably have read the book of Acts many, many times, and you never noticed this. Because it's one of those things, it's almost a big gap.
$7, I guess.
So here we go. In the church at Antioch, now Antioch, where's Antioch? Anybody know?
Turkey.
Very good. It's right on the edge where Turkey and Lebanon come together. And it's certainly outside of Israel. You know, everything happens in Israel, right? God's up to something new. And it's at Antioch. And Antioch's named after, boy, I'll give a whole $1 to somebody if they know who Antioch is named after. Antiochus Epiphanes. And he was the guy that slaughtered the pig in the temple. Not exactly one of the bright lights of the Old Testament or the time of the Maccabees. But anyway, in the church at Antioch, there were prophets and teachers. Barnabas, Simeon called Niger, Lucius of Cyrene, Manaen, who'd been brought up with Herod the Tetrarch, and Saul. And while they were worshiping the Lord and fasting, the Holy Spirit said, "Set apart for me Barnabas and Saul for the work to which I have called them." So after they had fasted and prayed, they placed their hands on them and sent them off. Now, did anybody happen to catch why that's an odd collection of people? Let's look at the names.
It is.
Yeah. First of all, Barnabas, good Jewish boy, hung around with the disciples. Okay, we'd expect that's kind of the guy that God would choose to start the first missionary journey, right? And Simeon, who's called Niger. Well, Simeon, that's a Jewish name, but Niger means black. And Lucius of Cyrene. Well, Cyrene is the Berbers out on the coast, the southern coast of the Mediterranean Sea. My mind just went blank. Anyway, Lucius, and that's a Greek name. Latinized, but it's a Greek name, of Cyrene. So he's a Berber, or he's somebody from down, what in the world are these people all doing together? And Manaen, who was brought up in the household of Herod the Tetrarch, as other versions would say, was Herod a good guy? No, the Herods were kind of like the really bad Kardashians of their day. You know, I mean, they were killing each other and killing their children, and they were really quite nuts and bloodthirsty, and they were hated by the Jews. And yet, these are the people that God is sending off on the first missionary journey along with Paul. It's a multicultural birth of the church. Remember Acts 1:8? You will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and Judea. Oh, they hated Jerusalem and Judea. That's the county around Jerusalem. To Samaria, which we hated those people, but they were close. To the uttermost parts of the earth. Well, this is the beginning of the uttermost parts of the earth. And then I want to read one other quick passage. And that's further on the book of Acts. So Paul finally gets to, of all places, Athens. And the verse before says, all the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. And so the most brilliant people in the brilliant place of Athens, in the Areopagus, Paul gets brought in there. Paul never comes to the same city and does things exactly the same. There's no Paul method. He goes in and he reads the situation there, and God the Holy Spirit opens up the access point. Paul then stood up at the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "Men of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' Now what you worship is something unknown, I am going to proclaim to you." So he used their shrine and this fact that it's to an unknown God, and that's the open spot. That's the access point, the spatula point, we can call that. And he goes on to talk about that. Well, I'll read on. "The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by hands. And if he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything, because he He himself gives all people life and breath and everything else. From one man he made every nation of men, that they should inhabit the whole earth. Now listen. And he determined the time set for them, and the exact places where they should live. From one man he made every nation of men, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he determined the time set for them and the exact places where they should live. Let's pray. Father God, this is a crazy world, and it keeps getting crazier day by day, week by week. But we thank you that you are in control, and we thank you that you've chosen us to live in such a time as this. A time when the church is in the weakest point it's been in 300 years. At a time when we are surrounded by millions of new people with dozens, if not hundreds, of new religions and customs and cultures that make no sense to us. And yet, you determine the places of where people live. Many of these people come from places we could never dare enter without being killed if we were to want to go there and be witnesses. Father, give us a vision as big as our God. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, well, I'm going to give you a little drink tonight from a fire hose. But before we do that, I want to talk about the rules. Remember Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid? Well, yeah, but he says, but wait, we gotta have rules. There's rules in a knife fight. Well, we gotta have rules for a class. There'll be no knife fights. Okay, please be ready for class at 7 p.m. We will end as close to 8:30 p.m. as humanly possible. Please bring with you a Bible, a writer, a pen, whatever, the class notebook, which you have in front, have your name on, I hope already, the textbook, and a notebook or blank paper stuck in your notebook or in your folder here for taking notes, because you may want to take notes. Secondly, please sign up. Now, this is a sign-up sheet we're going to pass around. And I'd like everybody to sign up. You've got a choice of one or two things. You can either sign up to do a 3-minute devotion on whatever the Holy Spirit lays on your heart, something you read in the book, something in the class, something you saw in the news, something you heard in the sermon, whatever. 3-minute devotion. Or you can blow a couple bucks, and we're going to have 2 people each night bring cheap cookies. Now the reason for that is to try to avoid treat escalation. Because if one week somebody brings cookies, the next week somebody brings home-baked cookies, and the next week somebody has to make bars, and then the next week somebody has to make 2 kinds of bars, and all of a sudden the class is becoming a real burden to people. So please resist the temptation. Cheap store-bought cookies. Now these aren't bad. We've all heard of Nutter Butters. That's a commercial one. The one on the left, they're both from Aldi's. I just stopped there on the way here tonight. Do something like that. Each of you bring 1 package of cookies. Now, I know that's not going to be a gastronomical delight, but tough. Okay, so we'll start this. Which side should we start with? Who wants to start it? Okay, Jack. Anything but do devotions. No, devotions are really fun.
I read on Sunday. I don't.
Oh, okay. Oh, perfectamundo. Thank you.
I just got your text.
Oh, I can't talk without being able to write. Okay, let's finish the rest of this up. Decaf coffee will be provided. Otherwise, we'll be up all night. If you want to bring anything else, fine. If you want to come and eat your supper, if you want to come, anytime you want to get up and go to the bathroom or come and have a cup of coffee or whatever, you're free to do that. Don't do handstands or backflips or whatever, but just go on up and this is going to be very relaxed, okay? We're all friends here. All right. Each week you'll have a reading assignment or assignments. Please take your time. Follow the book chapters by answering the review questions. What review questions? Well, the dumb old author didn't put any review questions in the book. That'll happen in version 2.0. But you'll notice inside the book, if you open up your notebook there, it has review questions for chapter 1, and the next page is chapter 2, and it follows in order just like that. So if you'll go through those and those review questions, it'll help you to kind of put the ideas in your head, okay? And don't write pages, write a couple sentences. Now, when you read the book, put your name in your books tonight, and please mark them up. Paperback books are not great works of literature that are going to stand for the ages. I have many of my paper books from college and seminary, and they're all falling apart. So mark them up. What I tell my students to do always is to underline, or whatever system you use, little arrows or pointy fingers or whatever, circle if you like that. And then at the end of each chapter, take a little, or if you see something you find interesting, either put a star by it or something, and write it at the end of the chapter. There's a blank page, I think it's the end of every chapter, and just write down something you found interesting, something you might think you want to go back to. Okay? Does that make sense? Mark them up, and they'll never be worth anything anyway, so that's fine. Okay, so read the reading assignment. Now, one of the weeks you're going to have to read something you find online, and I'll explain what that is. It was an earth-shattering, it was an extremely important turning point in the history of global missions. This one essay called A New Macedonia, and you're going to read that a little later on, not tonight, weeks to come. Okay. All right. And then answer the review questions that are in your notebook. Okay, field projects. We're going to have 2 field projects, and they're not scary and they're kind of fun. But we're going to be bum, 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 ba-da-da. Okay, here's what the deal is. This week, before class next time, and don't leave it go the way I tried to memorize stuff for confirmation. Don't leave it till the night on the way on your way to church. I want you to go to Walmart or Aldi. I want you to walk around Aldi. You can even shop if you want. Walk around Aldi or Walmart for a half an hour, and look to see how many folks of other cultures you notice shopping or working. And then you can make a guess as to where you think they come from. You can listen to their language. You can kind of hide behind the magazine rack or whatever you want to do. Bum, 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 bum. Okay, and you're just going to go there. Now, what is your guess as to their land of origin? And if you wish, you may even talk to them. Hi, I'm taking a class on immigration. You've got such a beautiful accent. Where's your family from? I never asked where you're from, and I'm not with immigration, whatever. But people get very nervous if I answer that. But I usually find you've got such a beautiful accent, and then I ask, where's your family originally from? Oh, I'm taking a class. Okay, and now secondly, then B, starting at 11:07, we will all do detective work, cue music, to discover who are the immigrants in our area, their ethnic background, their heart language, where they live in the local area, where they're at on the enculturation process. We'll talk about that, what that means. Now you can start thinking about this project right now and watching for places to investigate. You're all going to go to different places. And if somebody else has chosen the place, then you've got to find something else. But some suggestions are the laundromat. People that are new in the community, really new in the community, or very poor, oftentimes go to the laundromat. Good place to have a brochure for the church. You can bring those along too. Laundromat. Rental agents. Rental agents are a treasure trove of information. I know they can't tell you any information. I don't want any specific information. I just want to know what you run into. And I just want 15 minutes of your time. That's all. They might, once they get going, they might give you more than that. Might want to call ahead or pop in. They're used to people popping in. That's how they rent their place. Real estate agents, mobile home park, schools, ethnic restaurant search, and maybe visit if you want. Non-English language church. I don't know what's up here. I don't know if we have any here. I'm guessing we do. Go to an auto parts store. Immigrant people drive jalopies. People working in the auto parts store are oftentimes immigrants. And so, or go to a construction site. The neighborhood that I grew up in Little Canada, the last truck farm in Little Canada, our very, very dear friends, like family, the grandma and grandpa and the mom and dad have all passed away, and there's a son who's, I think, 13 years younger than me, and he just sold the farm for about $4 million, I heard. But my folks, the yard where where we lived, the house had been torn down and rebuilt, but I drove in there last week, or 2 weeks ago, and I got stuck. And they're doing all this work across the way, cement work, and they're putting in foundations and a whole bunch of stuff. And all of a sudden I had 10 Latinos who were helping to lift and push the rental car I was driving, which was stuck on the curb because it only had that much clearance under it. And gracias por ello. And I got to talk to them in Spanish for about a half an hour, and they got a big kick out of the fact. And I said, yeah, I grew up right there. And they were very helpful. I can order my hamburger the way I want it at almost any restaurant in the Twin Cities. McDonald's, buenas noches, and anyway, whatever. You're surrounded by people. You know, when I grew up 55 years ago in Little Canada, if I ran into one or two native speakers of Spanish in a year, that was a good year. Now we've got maybe 250,000 Latinos in the Twin Cities. In the spring of 8th grade, I remember standing out in the yard. Dad was working in the garden, and I said, well, am I going to take German or French or Spanish? And he said, Roland, he said, take Spanish. He is the smartest man that ever lived. Anyway, okay, so think about some of the places you might run in. You may come up with all kinds of other things, places where people are. So put your thinking caps on and be creative, all right? That's not going to start till the 7th of November. Okay, so the purpose of this class is to give you some basic understanding of what is a culture, how can we learn a culture, how do we meet those people, how do we learn their needs, and ultimately come alongside them, okay? People who are here, depending upon where they're at in the acculturation process, FOB, fresh off the boat, to somebody who's maybe been here 10 years, very different needs, and the way God is going to prepare for you to befriend them. Most of us don't make many friends after we're 20 years old. That's really sad. And really taking some time. Have you got other new friends that maybe haven't? How many of you have close friends that you've met in the last 20 years? Good. Okay, a lot of people don't do that. And this is about befriending and coming alongside people, and depending upon where they're at. So here's a key concept, number 6. Everybody has something that they can give away without cost that somebody else desperately needs. Everybody has something they can give away without cost. You don't have to be handing out $20 bills. The congregation doesn't have to spend thousands of dollars. The pastor doesn't have to lead it. The pastor doesn't have to organize it. Simple little hobby ministries, bite-sized, a very limited amount of time per week, but to find that little niche that God has prepared, that access point, that's what the class is about, okay? And so we're going to learn about people and so forth. If you go to the next page, the schedule here. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about the whole world has changed and the church is asleep. Mostly tonight about how the whole world is there. So this next week you're going to read the intro and chapter 1 of Wells. That really feels funny to say that. Anyway, and then the next week you can see what we're going to be doing. Next week you're going to be after the session 2 you're going to read that essay and so forth. You can see what's here. So it's not going to be an overwhelming amount of work, but it'll be an hour and a half, 2 hours of work outside. So take some time with, and we're going to just have fun with this. Stop me anytime you have a question. okay? If you disagree, if you've got this course is politically neutral. It's neither pro-immigration or anti-immigration. Immigration, we're going to find, is a global phenomena in all places, of all peoples, everywhere today. So let's get going. Anybody have any questions, comments, jokes, recipes?
I got this dynamite goulash that I make.
Very well, that's Hungarian. Oh, you're making us hungry. All right, so anyway, there's the MissionShift logo. MissionShift reaching the world next door. Red and yellow, black and white. They are precious in His sight. So here's the, I've heard that title someplace before. The world has changed and the church is asleep. There's something happening right now globally that's going to have more of an impact on the globe than the coming and the fall of the Roman Empire. It's going to have more of an impact than everything that came out of the Black Death, which killed half the people in Europe. It's going to have more of an impact than the, can you guys see, the settling of Europeans in the New World. It's going to have more of an impact than everything that came out of World War II, including the coming of the nuclear age. Now, what in the world could possibly be that impactful? Remember about 30 years ago, there was a movie called The Perfect Storm. Anybody ever see that?
Yeah.
There's I don't know if you can hear this. Oh, I guess I took it out. Anyway, there was a perfect storm. It was happening the same time we were having the holiday blizzard, the Halloween blizzard. That same day, 3 huge storms collided in the North Atlantic, and that's what that movie is about. Is this poor little boat full of frozen fish that they really wanted to bring home. Are we okay? Okay. So there's the perfect storm. A triple whammy is going on. First of all, urbanization. Now, this is quite remarkable in human history. If we look at the growth of cities, now if you look up the numbers on this and do Google searches, you're going to find numbers all over the place, because what is a city? Is 100,000 people a city? Is 500,000 people a city? Is 1 million people a city? Well, that's why the numbers. And many countries in the developing world don't even have a good census data as to how many people they have. So let's take a look. That's 3%, that little flat square. In 1800, there was 1 billion people. Maybe we should shut off some of these lights. I hate to put you to sleep. Just maybe the front ones, the ones I just had you turn on, sorry. Billion people, 3% lived in cities. There was 1 city of 1 million people in the world. It was the dickens of a city. Anybody know what it might have been? London, yeah. And it was at a time of great social change, because the great landowners decided they were going to put their money into sheep. And so they kicked all these peasants in Scotland and Ireland and England off their land, and we end up with this Dickensian situation of children begging and all that. Well, the population continued to grow, and so by the time we get to 1900, a whopping 10% of the world's people lived in cities. And there's now about 1.5 billion people on the earth. Now, after World War II, the graph went vertical. Thank you. The graph went vertical, and it both in the growth of population and in the growth of people coming to cities. So that in 2000, we had just over 6 billion people on the earth, coming up on 7. We are now at 8 since 2000. 50% lived in cities. 50%. It went from 10% to 20%. I'm sorry, from 3% to 10% to 50%. But by 2050, 75% of the world's people are going to live in cities. 75%. And areas like northwestern North Dakota and Montana, there are whole counties that are down to one high school that maybe has 6 or 7 kids in their graduating class. All the other schools have closed because everybody that farms there probably has, 5,000, 6,000, 10,000 acres of wheat. And they go out and they visit it, and they plant it, and then they maybe check it a couple times during the year, and then they go back and harvest it. And nobody lives out there anymore. So in that same sort of moving out of rural places into urban areas, I was teaching in Ecuador almost 30 years ago, and the cities there were full of young people because they didn't want to be subsistence farmers, eating cuy, guinea pig, and just having a few potatoes. They wanted to move to the city and have a blender and a boombox like everybody else. And they still lived in great poverty, but the $35 a month that they made then was much better than they could do at home. And the same, China, all over the world, people are moving to cities. They're being drawn into cities. Now, when people move, we're going to be talking about people movements. There's both a push and a pull. Push is, why do the people want to leave there? My ancestors on my dad's mom's side came from the Irish potato famine. In the 1850s, their whole area in Western Ireland was starving to death, literally. In fact, we think my great-great-grandfather probably did starve to death. And my great-great-grandmother took her 2 boys and went to England. She earned some money, and they probably came over steerage on some boat down with the goats and the Irish, as they'd say, and came over and they built a new life here. There was a push going on. What are some of the things that would push somebody out of their country? War, yep, exactly. The draft, the Germans, those crazy Prussians, they were picking on everybody, and so they took the kids and said, yeah, we're going to Carver County, yeah.
My brother did some searching. My great-grandmother draft out there, so.
Yeah, well, that's probably true in Brenda's family too. I'm not a pulpit, so I can say that.
Wages?
Wages? Oh yeah, sure. A little differential, $35 a month
That's right.
versus $20 an hour here.
Being not the oldest in the family, where you don't inherit that farm.
Land shortage, yes. As did you know that with the invention of cast iron pans in the beginning of the 19th century, that the number of women who died in childbirth dropped dramatically? Because fewer of them were anemic because of the iron they got from the cast iron frying pans and Dutch ovens and so forth. So that's why places like Norway all of a sudden had a population boom, or Ireland, and so they left. Minnesota's got more Norwegians than people. So anyway, I'm Norwegian. I can make fun of the Norwegians. Anybody here Swedish? You can't help it. All right. I'm sorry. I knew I was going to say something terrible like that. All right, so let's take a look. Not only do we have cities, but we have megacities. In 1950, there was one city of 10 million people in the world. And there used to be I think it was called Naked City. The city has stories of 9 million, well, it should have probably been 10 million, but anyway, anybody know what that city was?
New York.
New York. It was New York. By 1985, there were 9 megacities. By 2004, there were 19. By 2009, there were 30. And the last time I checked, 2023, it's 39. 39 megacities. And there's a region in China we're going to see here where the megacities have grown together to the point that there is 130, 140 million people living in one big block. There are cities of 10 million people that neither you nor I know the name of. Think about that. This is just amazing. In our lifetimes, this has happened. Now, this is a map of the cities of the world, and how much they have grown. Now, you probably can't see these itty bitty things here, but this is not the dark spots, 1950, 1990, 2015, and 2020. So the lighter it is, the later it is. So we can see, okay, Tokyo has always been a very busy, full place. London, New York, the West Coast. But we can see all these other major areas that have been filling out and expanding. If we look just at Asia, look at how those cities have expanded. And remember, the area of the circle grows with the square of the radius. So if a circle just gets this much bigger, it's still many times more number of people than there was before. Or if we just look, 1950, these were the world's largest cities. 2000, these are the world's largest cities. But now look, by 2015, look how the mega cities have exploded. Now that's almost unfathomable. Now each of these cities need water. We'll talk about that. Sewage, food. Why are people moving? Well, this came out a couple years ago. China, land of 1.3 billion, is short of labor. People are moving from the hinterlands of China into other places, mostly into the cities. They leave the kids with grandma and grandpa, and they could only have one kid. When we were in China a few years ago, we had a really neat guy. He was a Christian, and he would talk about his family. Now, he grew up in an apartment that was 10 feet by 10 feet. That was mom and dad and the kid. He was the kid, and that was all of their living space. The bathroom was down the block. Okay, they had no running water in the apartment. They had no toilet facilities, even in the building. And so in Beijing, it gets a pretty cold winter. His bedroom was the wrought iron balcony, and that's how he grew up. And now his parents are alive. He has a girlfriend. They wanted to get married. Her parents are alive. His grandparents are alive on both sides. Her grandparents are alive on both sides. So that one couple, it's their responsibility to take care of 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 people. And that's how it works. And the parents are forced to retire at age 60 and live on a really tiny pension. So I think this is my pocket.
Yeah.
Okay, good. The whistle. So this kind of moving of people to other places, that's within their own country. Now, when we talk about people moving, we can talk about refugees, we can talk about asylees, we can talk about, there's all kinds of different groups that come here for different reasons, and we're going to talk a little bit about that further on. But these are people how many people, were there many people in your high school class that moved more than 50 miles away from home? No?
Yeah.
I've got high school friends all over the United States.
Mhm.
There's a few left in Minnesota. But the problems in all these cities are the same, whether it's Tokyo or whether it's Quito or whether it's Bogota, Colombia. My son took that picture. Several million people live in that one little cauldron of an old volcano. Or the same thing is true in Minneapolis. This used to be the W Lite shop. W Lite, beautiful music for your busy day. W Lite 102.9 FM. It used to be WCCO, and then it was W Lite, and I don't know what it is now. But that's where my church was for 30 years, right there. Can't see it, but oh well. So Minneapolis, they've all got the same problems. The challenges of cities are the same worldwide. Young people move to the city. They don't have grandma and grandpa and aunts and uncles and all the people who normally kind of help hold young marriages together. You know, they say it takes a village to raise a child. No, it takes parents to raise a child, but it takes a village to hold a marriage together. I'm amazed anybody's still married. It's really hard to stay married. But young people come, whether they marry or not, a lot of times under the influence of American culture, you know, they start having a family, and then there's a divorce, and now we've got a single parent family. Well, single parent families in most of the world have no governmental support or any other kind of support. Oftentimes the divorce is connected with physical abuse. And it leads, in many cases, to prostitution, HIV/AIDS. In the cities, we see chemical dependency, mental illness from the stresses. I had a missionary tell me that mental illness was unknown in Africa until Western culture came and cities began growing like that. And the same kind of educational, economic development, water, sewage, healthcare needs are in every city in the world. And many cities don't have any. Now we can talk about a billion here and a billion there, or a million there. My son was down in Colombia a few years ago with a group called YWAM. And they served in some different places. He was wading through sewage barefooted with a wheelbarrow and moving dirt and stuff like that. But when they went into a soccer stadium, they were going to put on a presentation, and all of a sudden their host said, "Come on, you got to go," because there were Shining Path guerrillas coming in the other side of the soccer field and kidnapped them. Sendero Luminoso. And these little, the one ministry they went to had a ministry where they had a long trough bathtub type thing, and they filled it up with hot water, and the kids took off their grubby clothes on one end, and they jumped into the tub, and they scrubbed up as they passed through this long tub, and they got rinsed off, and they washed their hair, and on the other end they got new clothes from the United States. And so these little girls, you see they've got a couple barrettes in their hair, and they've got some new, nice clean clothes. This one here, it kind of looks like nobody's home. These girls are what are called shoeshine boys in Latin America. Shoeshine boys are parentless children. Sometimes parents will literally drop their children off on the street because a woman has a new boyfriend and he doesn't want kids around. Now that sounds impossible. Or they'll drop them off in Mexico, very common, drop them off in an orphanage. We'll try to pick you back up. But in Latin America, Brazil, Central America, there's nothing like that. And so these kids sleep in puppy piles. They steal, they beg, they sell chiclets, they're stealing stuff, pilfering stuff from the various vendors. And the older kids prostitute the younger kids. The little one on the left was 18 months, and that day she was being treated for gonorrhea. So we can talk about statistics, but it comes down to people like this. Look at the eyes of the one on the right. The distrust and the fear that she's already learned. She's 4. They're on their own. So that's what's happening globally. And we've got kids that are just as feral in Minneapolis. They've got social services around them, but we've got lots and lots of chaos. And also in every other community, there are people here who live because of drugs, because of crime, because of intellectual ability, whatever. The schools know this too. Many of the schools in the suburbs have more than 50% of the kids getting free lunch. Maybe higher. Well, not everybody does, but I mean before in the federal program. Simply because it's too chaotic in their family. Now, our presupposition as we talk about ministry, and that could be here, it can be mission work beyond it, but is that we can learn about any city or any community by learning how to learn our community. And so we're going to try very hard to learn our community. Oops, I lost something there. Oh, there we go. Okay. So we talked about the perfect storm of change. So the first part is of the perfect storm of change is what? Urbanization. Okay, and the second one, this is the mind blower, is the largest migration in human history.
Sure.
Now, we are in the midst of the greatest human migration in the history of the world. Perhaps 2 billion people are on the move. And as far as people who aren't on the move, the percentage of people, other people who have been on the move and have come to a new place in the last 10 years, maybe double that, out of 8 billion people. Think of all the wars and famines and dictatorships that you have thought about or heard in your lifetime. Okay, so there's the pressure. There's the pressure of crime. There's the pressure of gangs. There's the pressure of political. There's the pressure of you're on the wrong party. My secretary for many years is from Ethiopia, and her sister was married to a high-ranking diplomat in Ethiopia, and his party won, but then all of a sudden that party split. And when that party split, he was on the short end of the stick. And all of a sudden, his life was very much in danger. And he took his wife and his son with a diplomatic visa and sent them to the United States. They didn't want to go to the United States, but they had to go or die. He went into hiding way out in the hinterlands. And the family still hasn't been united. That's 20 years almost. These are people who are around us every day. And these were high-ranking people, educated, high-ranking people. So people from everywhere are moving every place else. Sunday, I talked to a bunch of Indian students who are up looking at Jay Cooke State Park. And Chinese are going to South America, and Chinese are going to America, and Chinese are going everywhere. We were down in San Jose, Costa Rica, I don't know, about 10 years ago, and we decided to take a tour which would take us across the city and then up on the top of the rim of another volcanic cauldron, and so we could see the lights of the city, and there was a nice meal, and there was some folkloric dancing there. So I don't have to drive, and I'm a little ADHD. I bore easily. And so I'm sitting there in the back of the bus and didn't have a phone to play with. Started looking at license plates. No, I can't count the states because they're all Costa Rica. All right. So I saw a Chinese restaurant. Then I saw another Chinese restaurant. Another Chinese restaurant. And on one side of one trip across this city, which is, I don't know, 6 miles wide, I lost count on one side of the street, on one street, of over 60 Chinese restaurants. Now those were not being run by ticos, that's what Costa Ricans call themselves. Guess who they were being run by?
Chinese?
Yeah, I was going to say Bulgarians, no. We hit a Mexican restaurant in Spain last year, and we thought, oh yeah, it'd be kind of fun. We haven't had anything like that, Mexican restaurant. And here it's being run by Kashmiri Indians. It was really weird Mexican food.
I suppose.
But it was, huh?
No curry in it?
Yeah, oh, fine curry. We have very good hot curry. Yeah, people are everywhere and from everywhere else. Now, who are these people that come? You can sit that for me. Let's start on the top and kind of work our way down. First of all, there are many visas. Not just the one in your pocketbook, but visas. There are over, well, the alphabet has what, 26 letters in it? There's over 2 times through the alphabet different visas. The student visa is Visa F. I think that's kind of funny. And there's A, and there's A1, and there's double A, and there's B, and double B, and so forth. And each of these are for different people with different qualifications. Some people come here to work. We realize the number of people that come here as engineers. These students that we talk to, I always try to talk to foreign students. I used to teach an education course on welcoming immigrants. Where are you guys from? Well, we're from the south of India, by Bangalore, and we talk, and oh, great, I'm glad you're here. What are you studying? Are you studying STEM? And they all laugh, so science, technology. Oh yeah, how many engineers? What kind of engineer? And they say, well, I'm going to be a mechanical engineer, and I'm a computer engineer. And anybody going into medicine? No, but they were happy to be welcomed because apparently that wasn't common. And they're here. Do you realize that both China and India have more honor students than we have students? More honor students than we have students. There's a lot of smarty pantses out there, and they want to come and get the best education possible. The University of Minnesota has more of the very highest ranking Chinese people who will be the entire upper crust of the China of 20 years from now. Do you know that the current president of China, is that the right word? Premier, Grand Poobah, whatever it is. Do you realize that he was a foreign exchange student in rural Iowa? Now what if somebody would have told him about Jesus? These people that we have more than at the University of Minnesota than any other university in the United States. And 80% of them are never invited into an American home. There's a center for Chinese immigrant students at the university. It's one of the most strategic, important ministries in the entire United States. Have you ever heard of it? The future of China is right there. The whole world is in movement. Okay, so you've got visas. My brother-in-law was the head of Cato Engineering in Mankato for many years, and he. But Cato Engineering was under Caterpillar, but in between it there was a French division, so everything had to go through France. He had a lot of interesting stories to tell about that. But they said you cannot be paying for us. These are expensive American engineers. We want you to get all your engineering done by people from India. And he says, I've got engineers right here that have been working with me for years, and they're freelancers, and they know everything we're doing. No, we want you to be having Indian engineers. So this is what, 15 years ago maybe? They fly over here, and these are mechanical engineers. And he wines and dines them and shows them the whole plant, shows them what they're doing, gives them blueprints, and they're going to be there a couple more days. And he gets home that night late, and he gets a call from the motel. It's the manager of the motel panicking. He says, your engineers have just flooded the entire first floor. They didn't understand how to work the bathtub. Mechanical engineers. They were great engineers, but they'd never run into that kind of plumbing before. You ever run into funny plumbing when you're traveling? Okay. Well, anyway, so people are coming over here. I don't think there's a nurse left in the Philippines. Have you been in the hospital, and who took care of you in the middle of the night? Almost universally, English is not their first language. But the Filipinos come here, and then they can get a visa, and they can settle here, and so forth. So there are visas. There's a State Department lottery, and I've met several people who have won that. The State Department lottery, you can go to an American embassy, you can come with the appropriate papers, you can fill it out, and your name goes into the hat. And every year, the State Department draws 1 million names. And you and your family can come and settle in the United States. Now, you don't get benefits, but you do get a green card right away. And these people come, and they want to come here. They dream of coming here. They are just like our ancestors, wanting to come here and want to be Americans. My grandparents wouldn't teach my mom or my uncle how to speak Norwegian. And they said, why won't you teach us how to speak Norwegian? Grandpa would say, yeah, we don't want them calling you round-headed Swedes. Sorry. But that'd be the worst thing in the world, wouldn't it? Anyway, these are people who want to be here. Now that's the lottery. Now there's another term. People like my secretary's sister can come here for asylum.
Why not?
I wasn't sure if it was,
You will.
there we go. I wasn't sure if it was one S or two. If you ever talk in Spanish, everything we have a double letter in English has a single letter in Spanish. And ever since I took Spanish 50 years ago, I can't spell double letter words worth beans. Anyway, asylum seekers, these are people that if they stay where they're at, they're dead meat. But they by themselves come to our borders. They get here somehow. So people from Russia, I have a guy that we worked with, I don't want to go off into a long story, but he came over here with his daughter, who was working as a doctor at the University of Minnesota, became a Christian and went back to one of the Muslim parts of Russia. And his life was in danger. His life was in danger, very much in danger. Well, they were able to come over, and I don't know what his whole route was, but he ended up coming to our country up through Mexico and knocked on the door and said, I declare I want asylum. And it was a Christmas Eve. It was a weird, weird time because we get this phone call, and I don't know who in the world it is. And they're very curt with me. They want an answer whether we will serve as the contact person. He's a great guy.
The INS.
Yeah, INS. I'm sorry. I'm so glad my external memory drive is here. Brenda will not be with us every week. She's got some commitments on Monday, on Tuesday nights. But anyway, thank you. Let me know if I drop out other fun facts. Asylums. Okay, so we go from asylum, and a lot of these people, there's a lot of people coming up from Mexico, or they come from Africa, and they kind of make up stories. And they really just want to become Americans. And a lot of return to their home places. Now, we have been allowing Venezuelans to come up here and been granting them asylum. But just last week, the president said, we're not going to give asylum to Venezuelans anymore. Just boom. These people have maybe traveled all the way from Venezuela over and up through all of Central America and the jungles and everything, and all the way across Mexico. And they're in America or knocking on the door, and he says, we won't let you in, or we're going to send you home. Central Americans right now, the gang problem, Ecuadorians, the gang murders going on in Ecuador. There's never been anything like that in Ecuador before. So asylum seekers can be political, they can be gangs, and so forth. Refugees. Now this is a word that's misunderstood by the press. It's misunderstood kind of universally. A refugee is somebody who the UN has declared to be a refugee. UN High Commissioner for Refugees. What does it mean to be a refugee? First of all, a refugee has to be from country A and has been forced to go to country B. So you can't be in country A and say, I'm a refugee. Even if you go to the opposite end of your country, you're not a refugee until you cross the border into a new place. And there, if the UN is working, you will talk to the UN, and the UN will set up a camp. So for example, there are huge camps in Kenya for the Somalis. And the Somali civil war has been brutal and horrible, and lots of stories about talking with Somalis about what happened to them. And by the way, there's so many Somalis in Minneapolis. We've got more Somalis in Minneapolis than any other town in the United States. And by the way, we have more of the highest level refugee resettlement agencies in Minneapolis than any other city, Minneapolis, St. Paul, than any other city in the United States. Why? Because after World War II, there were a lot of displaced persons. Remember East Prussia, the east side of Germany, all those people were pushed out and they lost their homes, and a lot of them came to the United States. Hungarians, Czechs, they all came over here, and Lutheran Social Service, Catholic Charities, and some others said, well, we'll find a place for you, and they did. And by probably 1955, 56, that had tapered off. People were placed, And they just put the notebooks on how to do it on the shelf. But then after the Vietnam era, we all of a sudden had the five main groups, the Vietnamese and the Vietnamese Chinese, the Lao and the Cambodians and the Hmong. It's not Hmong, it's Hmong. Good buddy is a deer hunter with a Hmong pastor, Dr. Chermua. It's a deer too, and I know. Anyway, so they took out the notebooks, dusted them off, and they resettled tens of thousands of Southeast Asians. And they learned. I remember there was a Lutheran ministry called the Southeast Asian Ministry. They're all Southeast Asians. They've all got slanty eyes. I guess we can just do the same thing with all of them. Well, the reason they've been fighting for hundreds of years there is that because the Chinese were pushed down out of China, and the Vietnamese were pushed down from further north, and the Laotians were being pushed from the west over to the east, and the Cambodians were being pushed up, and they've been colliding there and fighting for hundreds and hundreds of years, and they don't particularly like each other. And so, how do you have one ministry for all those? Well, you end up specializing with individual ministries because they don't hang out together. They define themselves over against these other groups, kind of like Swedes and Norwegians, right? Well, we laugh about that, but in Scandinavia, it's there's still some hard feelings in Norway about the fact that the Swedes stayed neutral and made money off the Germans. But the Swedes also protected Jews, and they allowed the Norwegians to go. I mean, these things are all
Messy.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Okay, so refugees. Now, so they are determined by the UN. Of the people in these camps, they try to get them to go back to their country. They try to find ways for them to go back and so forth, and most of them do. Those that can't go back, most of them, they will set up a satellite village of that group of people and try to get infrastructure and water and all these things, and that will become their new home, which the other country might not like. For example, after many, many years, Thailand kicked out all the Hmong camp people because they just didn't want them around anymore. And that was the last wave that came through about 10 years ago of Hmong folks. The Karen, the Kaching that have come here from Burma, same thing. And finally, there's about 5% who, because of special needs, and oftentimes these people have been really beat up, about 5% are allowed to go out to a different country. In the United States, take more than anybody else. And there's Scandinavia per capita probably takes more. Now, there are migrants of various kinds. Think about all the people that left Syria and headed across Europe, and the Turks, and all the people that are in Europe now from all these different areas. Some of them are refugees, but some of them just migrate because they're people migrating. And maybe they can get asylum, or maybe they're just people migrating. They've got the same, they're being pushed, and there's a pull. There's jobs and services and so forth. Now, along with that, then there are migrants who are visaed. So Latinos who come up here, some of them have temporary worker status, and so they have green cards. They maybe work in landscaping, or they're needed, and the paperwork has been filed, and they're allowed to come up here for a while and then go back. We have a lot more need, but there's a very tight limit on those people. They maybe pick citrus, pick lettuce, that kind of stuff. Is making sense? There are some, okay? But then there are many who come here who are not documented. Now, these are the undocumented, illegal immigrants. Okay, we're going to talk more about that as we go. But all these are immigrants, and we have many people across this spectrum. A lot of these people make more money than you and I will ever make. These people are hardworking people, totally legal and so forth. And again, we're going to find each of these people have very different needs and different ways of doing ministry to them. Can you see how this gets complex? Just wait, there's more. All right, so there we have our immigrants going all over the place. So 1 million new immigrants come legally via the lottery to the U.S. last year. 125,000 refugees were allowed in last year. Another million entered or remained illegally. Visas, historical immigrants began in the core city, and then typically, as they got their ducks in a row and got jobs over, they moved further and further out. So, for example, Woodbury, Maplewood, Champlin, Brooklyn Park have large immigration communities of Asia, Laotian, Cambodian, up in, and Liberians up on the west side of the river going north, and Hmong people, many, we've got over 100,000 Hmong in the Twin Cities and their families, but some of them are third generation now. And as they become more acculturated and prosperous, they tend to move to more stable neighborhoods. So, starting 30 years ago, we had people coming into tenements in Phillips neighborhood in Minneapolis, and they would figure out what was going on, and they would then move into a little better neighborhood, maybe 10 blocks away. That was a little safer. But then they would try to get on Section 8 or some kind of program that would be more affordable, and they would do that. They might end up out on Olson Memorial Highway. But then finally now they're living way out in the third and fourth ring suburbs. They have jobs, they have homes, they've saved their money. And so again, where people are at in the acculturation process historically will determine to some degree where they live. But now we have people who are starting out as brand new people, and they're, Brainerd. I think the last time I checked, there were 3 Spanish language TV stations on the cable in Brainerd. Why? Because who do you think's running the restaurants, doing all the yard work, and so forth? Okay, so we have a labor shortage. We aborted a third of the class of 22 and 21 and 20, and we have a shortage of children. Whole industries, hotels, restaurants, roofing, landscaping couldn't function without immigrants. Now, one of the challenging things here is that this is very complex, and this is about as political as I'm going to get. And please don't throw anything at me yet. At the federal level, the federal government has not cared a whole lot about immigration. One house or one party will pass something, and they'll make a big, they passed the Senate passed an immigration law, but it never gets to the House. It's called grandstanding for votes for people who don't understand what's going on. In the Democratic Party, one side of the Democratic Party says, be compassionate, let everybody in. The other side of the Democratic Party says, are you nuts? They're taking away union jobs. The Republican Party, one side says, keep America from Americans, slam them borders shut. And the other side says, are you nuts? This cheap labor is our only chance to compete with China. So on the federal level, immigration has been locked up for 25 years, 30 years. And in fact, and I don't want to get off on an argument with this, the Republicans have been more open to bringing in illegal immigrants than anybody else. Let that sink in for a minute. Now, on the federal level, they don't want to touch it. Now, also, and we're going to have a slide on this I'll skip over, of those 15 million illegal immigrants, 15 million of all the different backgrounds in the United States, a high percentage of them are paying in money into the Social Security Fund on made-up numbers or numbers of dead people. There are many places in the Twin Cities where you can go and you can buy a fake green card, you can buy a fake Social Security card, which somebody has looked up the numbers of somebody who died a long time ago, and now your name is Fred Johnson, which is pretty funny for a girl. But that's your Social Security number, and you'll pay into that. Sometimes just pick a number, and you'll notice at the end of the year, all of a sudden your Social Security has another, reports another $30,000 worth of income. Now all of a sudden you might have an IRS problem. But it's because your number was drawn out of a hat by somebody who just picked a number to pay into Social Security. But they're paying somewhere between $50 and $60 billion a year into the Social Security Trust Fund. And it has a huge impact on the well-being of the Social Security Trust Fund, which is another big reason why the feds have ignored it. And that's very provable, but it never gets talked about. Yeah.
They pay in, but they don't get the benefit.
Oh, good. They never get money out. No, they can't get the money out. They're paying our Social Security. Thank you very much. Yeah. Now think about that. That's the hidden 15% immigrant tax paid by employers and paid by immigrants that they can never touch. The people who get really bugged by this are the states, especially the Sun Belt states, where they have a lot more people coming in, because states pay for education, states pay for medical care, and so they pay the bills on illegal immigrants that come in. Because they don't get money from the feds, they've got to come up with the funds for it. So there's many things that never get talked about, and I have been studying this and trying to be very, very objective for over 30 years, and it's just mind-boggling all what happens. The inability of illegals to get car insurance or health insurance in many cases. There's all kinds of systems that, anyway. So that's the Social Security part. So we're just in the beginning of a lifetime of immigration. It's not going to end. We aren't having kids. Our kids aren't having kids. Gen Z, we went from the baby boomers to Gen X. It's a small baby boomers is a big generation. Gen X is a smaller generation. Then we have the millennials, the children of the boomers, and then we have Gen Z, which are the children of the Gen X. These are both small generations, except with the coming of the Gen Z is less than 50% Caucasian for the first time in American history. And immigration has to keep happening because our economy is based on growth. If the population doesn't grow, our economy tanks. Okay. So, for example, these folks, Karen refugees from Burma. Many of them are Christians. They had a huge people movement in Burma, and my wife said many of them as students. And one night she was having conferences, and she had Spanish. She taught at the Creative Arts Magnet School, Mississippi School, on 35E in Wheelock. And that's one of the schools that's a throwaway school for St. Paul. They put everybody who they knew couldn't pass the tests into that school so that the other schools would be higher. Okay? There are 3 or 4 schools in St. Paul that are designated to fail, and then they just fire every 5 years they get rid of a bunch of the faculty, and they say, we've reorganized the school and now it's all better. Well, no, but they designed it that way. Yeah, it's hard to believe, but this St. Paul schools, because nobody's a majority anymore, everybody's a minority, there's no desegregation rules. So the St. Paul schools today are more segregated by income and area than they have been in the last 75 years. But she had these Karen students, and so she's with a Latino family, and this little old lady who's about less than 4 foot tall and looks like she's 300 years old wanders into Brenda's class. Do you want to tell the story?
Well, sure. She comes in and
Nice and loud.
she comes in and she's looking around, and I thought she was somebody's grandma.
Maybe senile grandma.
But then she tells me that she's my interpreter for my next conference. She's just because we hire non-school employees to interpret for conferences because we don't have enough people. And she goes into this story that she has been a teacher for like 60 years. And she said it started when she was a child in Burma, and Burma was an English colony, yes, and they sent over missionaries. And she went to a missionary school, and she became a Christian, and she showed such promise that they even sent her to England,
Before World War II.
yeah, to become a teacher, to get her teacher training. And she came back and married a pastor, worked as a teacher until their lives fell
The
apart.
Yeah, because the Karen were on the side of the British, and the Burmese were on the side of the Japanese, they stood out as being very different from the rest. And so after World War II, they were persecuted. Go ahead. So where did she end up at?
Well, she said, so they would follow, their army, evidently their families came with them and just camped with the army. So she would go and live in these camps and set up a school. And, she told me how they would just use cardboard boxes to use as a blackboard. And then she said, that was right before Thanksgiving, she said to me, many times we just didn't have any food at all. And we would pray and God always provided. And it was kind of a real lesson to me too, because,
You have so many beautiful things.
yeah,
She
this
just-
classroom,
We had cardboard, some pencils. And to earn money for the school, she would illegally raise pigs under the school and sell them. And this is by now in the UN refugee camp. And anyway, these are people. These are people just like you and me. It just happen to be that's where they live. And so the Karen people are a great gift to us and very hardworking and so on. So if we're going to bring our new neighbors to Jesus, this is the critical time to learn. We should have been learning 30 years ago. Each group is going to need individual study, plan, and ministry. Each wave of each group, every subgroup is going to be different. Okay, I'm going to flip through this really quickly. The third part of this perfect storm of change is the fluidity of capital, labor, and information. Capital, labor, information have no boundaries. Complex manufacturing components can be outsourced. Displacement of workers and capital become more rapid. Do you know anybody who lost their job because the job went offshore? Most of us probably know of somebody or of a, why in the world is Medtronic headquartered in Ireland?
Obamacare.
Oh, it was before that.
No, they had to pay the Obamacare tax.
Yeah.
And they still had to meet their bottom line to make the stock market happy. And they moved and eliminated the Minnesota taxes. Not all of them, because they're still physically.
Well, and the American business taxes and.
Plus the Obamacare 2% tax on their products.
So things have moved, and a lot of Brenda's brother also would go to China because they'd be ordering little brass fittings and little things like that, and he would have to meet with the CIA before he left. And they said, every room you're in is going to be bugged. Everything you say at dinner is being written down by a waiter or somebody. And so just be very careful, because any room you go into, everything you say, somebody will hear. But it's been so much cheaper. Now their standard of living is coming up, and so we're actually pulling some manufacturing back, or we're moving it to Ethiopia, or we're moving it to someplace else. Remember when it was cheap Japanese junk, and then all of a sudden it was good Japanese cameras, and then it was cheap Korean junk, and then it was cheap Taiwanese junk, and now those people make really nice stuff and they have a very high standard of living. Then it was cheap Chinese junk.
Still is.
Well, somebody makes some very nice stuff too. When you're,
It's our stuff, they're stolen.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
let's just draw a line. They're
Yeah.
even with the communist Chinese, you're gonna get nothing but trouble.
Yeah, but can you draw that line when you're borrowing money from them?
We're gonna have to. I mean, come on.
well, I'm just saying, it's
Some point.
because the labor is so cheap, and because the free traders felt that this was the best way to ensure world peace, was to get us so enmeshed with each other we couldn't have it. Now, I'm getting way above my pay grade, but I'm saying all of these things, all of these three pieces, urbanization and migration and fluidity of capital, labor, and information add up to one thing, and that's called globalization, and it's going to change everything in your life if it hasn't already. And much of it is completely unstoppable. You're not going to stop people moving from point A to point B, and they're moving from everywhere to every place else. I was at the Lausanne Congress in Cape Town in 2010, where there were only 400 North Americans out of 4,000 people there. And the South Africans, the Kenyans, the Nigerians are dealing with people who are migrating there. It's a global phenomenon. The grass is always greener someplace else. So the new Twin Cities, that's about where we are, I think. And there have been 30 plus waves of immigration in our area since 1988. And Southeast Asians, Liberians, Tibetans, Somalis, Russian Jews, Hispanics, Korean, Kaching, so forth. Over 1 million immigrants and their families in the metro now. Minnesota has 218 languages at last count. 100 plus in South Minneapolis. Chippewa Middle School, 32 languages. 32 languages. Most are unreached by the gospel. 95,000 Somalis in the Twin Cities. That's a place you or I could never go, or really anybody else, to preach the gospel. But God has sent them here. Tibet, same thing. Southern Mexico, same thing. Over 200,000 Muslims in the Twin Cities. Mosques in the Twin Cities. 1946, we had our first Muslim family that's been of record. 1967, our first mosque. 1980, there were 3. 1990, there were 4. That's not a whole lot of growth, but it's 33%. 2000, it's 44. 2009, it's 100. 2017, these are the last numbers I think I have, were 152. And it may say Islamic Center or various things, but the thing that they love to do most, like with Oliver Presbyterian in South Minneapolis and Ebenezer Free Lutheran up in Northeast Minneapolis, is to buy churches. Over 250,000 Hispanics in the Twin Cities, and we believe that someone from every country on earth lives within a 3-mile radius of downtown. University of Minnesota, businesses downtown, so forth. And virtually every American church has new immigrants under the shadow of its steeple. That was our summer youth program a few years ago. Now, it's not just the core city. Brooklyn Center Schools, 68 languages. Roseville Schools, 80 languages. Fergus Falls Schools, 26 languages. Now you get places such as Fergus Falls, Pelican Rapids, Barron, Wisconsin. Hundreds and hundreds of immigrants. Why? Meatpacking. Turkeys, yeah. Pelican Rapids Schools, 16 languages. Now, why are all these people coming right now? Now, maybe you can figure out a better way to do this graph, because I've spent a long time thinking this through, and this is the best I can do. If we look at each of the generations, the World War II builders were born, in the 19-teens into the mid-1920s, okay? That generation is considered 1915 to 1929. Primarily, they are the baby boom after the First World War. Now, they entered the labor market, we'll say about here, 1920s, late 20s, the early first of them, and they retired from the labor market, in the sometime in the 1980s, late 1980s. Now, if you'll notice here, okay, so the World War II builders, they were the parents of the boomers. And so this is a big generation, this is a big generation, and the millennials are the next big generation. Now you'll notice the birth across after World War II, and then we get the Depression. And then until the end of World War II, the birth rate is down, and then World War II, the end of World War II, and we get the great prosperity of the 50s, and that runs until the mid-60s. 64 is about the end of the boomers, and at that point, the pill was invented, and then this group this group had their children, and now this small generation came in, and so they were the parents of this era, who we call Gen X. Now, when the World War II generation retired, which is a big generation, it was when Gen X was just coming in, and they were a small generation. Big generation retires, small generation coming in. What have we got? Pardon?
Shortage.
Yeah, labor shortage. So this is when immigration, this is when it really kicked off as far as people coming into the United States. Now the law was changed, I believe, in 1965.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until this area here that all of a sudden we get this tremendous suction going on from the United States. We've got 7 minutes, okay. Now, where we're at today is that the big baby boomer generation, I'm right in the middle of it, 53, this generation is retiring right at the time that the millennials, right at the time that Gen Z is coming in. So Gen Z is coming in here, and they are a small generation. And so once again, we have a great labor shortage. So the politics of this, again, nobody ever talks about it. The reality of labor shortage and what the parties on the national level are doing. And again, to the very heart of my being, after studying this as intensely as I can for the last 30 years, this is how I understand it. This is what I see is going on. And we're going to continue to have a need for workers for the foreseeable future. But that's why. So bottom line is, to reach our new 21st century world, we're going to need to learn to reach our neighbors in urban settings, and this is considered urban, cross-culturally. So everything now is global, because it's local, but it's global because we've got all these people from all these other places. And for the first time ever, we've got all these people coming in, and they're not from a Christian nation. They may be from places where there is no faith, or something that's very different. So there we are. This is your field. What are you going to do to reach them? Whose job is it to evangelize these people that are in our midst? Your pastors? You want to add about 30 hours a week on that? Maybe hire a couple more pastors? And that shouldn't cost more than $250,000 to do that. No, that's not going to happen. That's just not going to happen. That's not going to do it. Instead, we need to take these religious consumers in the pew, and think of the big warehouse churches and so forth. Go there to get blessed. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to help with anything. You just go there and take the religious consumer in the pew and turn them around and send them out as missionaries with a whole new understanding of themselves. But like the book we've been doing in church, this isn't just a lifeboat where we get together with people who are just like us. The German or the Scandinavian, everybody's the same politics, everybody's the same economic level, everybody. Did you see how the church started out in Acts 13? God's vision for the church might be a little greater than what we've experienced. And our job as a church is not to protect ourselves and be a safe place where we never feel threatened. But instead, we're called to be disciples. We're called to be evangelists. Everybody take your hand and reach your finger straight out like this. Please do it. Okay. Now bring it back right to here. Right here? Okay. Now, you feel some rubbery little things right here? Okay, go. Okay, these are called lips. And they help you to talk. And God is giving you lips and a larynx and all kinds of stuff. And you can be brave. Nobody's going to hurt you for sharing Jesus. Okay? But we're going to have to change our idea of what we're here for. We have to open our eyes and care about these people around us and learn about them. And it's going to be a great, joyful thing. I'm not trying to give you guilt. I'm not trying to give you I got one more thing I got to do for church. No. This is what God created you for. This is what God created you for. So, as God sent them to you, this guy was at a Mexican restaurant. I had a chance to talk with him a little bit. Luis El Molino, the mill. So we believe that God has a part in these folks coming here. He made from one man every nation of people who live on all the face of the earth, having determined the allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place. Do you believe God's word? Really? Do you think God maybe has something to do with all this happening? It's not geopolitics. I know it's time. I've got 2 minutes. The whole world has changed and the church is asleep. So we need to think like missionaries and local. We live in a time like no other time in human history. There have always been small migrations, the Germanic tribes breaking into Europe and the Celts before them, and then the Slavs pushing the Germans. And the south, in Africa, same thing. China, same thing. But there's never been anything like this where people from everywhere are going every place else. So is our God able to lead us to deal with this new world? Does our living Lord Jesus Christ desire that we share the gospel with our new immigrant neighbors? The Chinese characters for crisis are danger and opportunity. And that's where we're at. Okay, we've got 2 minutes for questions, comments. Email me, my email's in there, my phone for texting if you've got stuff. If you come up with questions while you're reading it, we'll take more time to talk. Any comments or thoughts? Be brave. Anything surprise you here?
No, because I read your book.
Is anybody angry here?
Overwhelmed.
No.
The million immigrants in the Twin Cities is
Yeah.
kind of astounding. But since when? I mean, what time frame
Well,
is that?
of immigrants and their families who've come here, I'd say probably since the 70s. So immigrant, the Hmong people, there are very few fresh Hmong who are coming.
Right.
But they have a Hmong community. You can go cradle to grave in the Hmong language. You can buy your insurance, you can buy all your food. Same thing with Latinos. And you can call home to Mexico for free every day. You can watch Mexican TV. And so we're developing whole clusters of people who are still very much in their former culture. And many plan to go home. Most of the Latinos probably plan to go home. Yeah.
This is probably, I don't know if this is an answerable question, but of all the immigrants in the Twin City area, how many of those do you think are Christian? I mean, we've got Latinos, I would think, that are Christian. And aren't the Hmong, or however you say it, aren't they, a lot of them are Christian?
A minority of the Hmong are Christian, but they've responded very well. There is a handful of Somali Christians in the Twin Cities, and they're persecuted. The Latinos, South American Christianity is basically the Indian religion with a thin veneer of Christianity. This God that you say is in charge of the crops, well, that's like Saint so-and-so. And so they syncretized, the Catholic Church did, and they've had a very hard time breaking through that. So I could talk at length about that, but yeah.
I had a Muslim gentleman come to an event at another church that I was at.
Mhm.
He wanted to make sure, first of all, that our meeting was going to be at night because his life was in danger.
Yeah.
He
Oh,
was
yeah.
a Shiite Muslim, and even his own family wanted to kill him.
Yeah.
But he gave his talk, and it was shocking to see that he is converting his life to Christianity. And what the price is for him to do that is pretty high.
There probably have been Muslims who've been killed for their faith in this town.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
I'm aware of some suggestions of that. I can't prove that. But it's happened in the United States, certainly. Okay, well, are you ready to go have some fun with us? We'll meet here, same time, same station.
Well, I gotta go to
And,
Walmart anyway.
Yeah, and enjoy the book and mark it all up and come up with questions. We'll have more time to talk about questions next time.
All right.
Okay? If you want to hang around and talk, that's fine.
So we should keep these and put them in there.
Hell yes, please keep your tents. Please keep your name tents.
There's your
Oh, and there's
calendar.
sign-up sheet. Okay, good, we got that. And thank you all for coming.
Roland, can you just remind us who signed up for what for next week?
Next week on October 24th, we have Carla